Good morning, Canadian Wes Bush. This is Wes Leah. I'm very happy to have you on my podcast, Spilling the Product Tea with Leah. Thank you very much for joining me. And I think we can just right away get started. Can you introduce yourself in a couple of sentences and then I introduce you back to the audience?
Yeah, for sure. So I guess I'm the person who's obsessed about PLG. Wrote the book on product-led growth, and that's kind of my like highlight to fame, I guess. But see if we can do a better job.
That is your introduction, the entire one.
Well,
You
I
wrote
think
the
you said it
book.
was like a two-liner thing, right?
Well, yeah, okay, fair enough. I was not specific
It's
enough.
like let's keep this short. What are two things? There we go.
Okay, well, my okay, no, let's just keep that. Wes is the guy with the book. That's okay. That's totally fine.
Yeah.
The funny enough, when I was getting into product like growth, I think your website was the only one or one of the ones that was constantly popping up and not getting out of my face.
Yeah.
Um, for good reason. You have something with a yellow brand, so your branding is very strong. The book
Yeah.
seems to sell well, and your face is everywhere when it comes to this. So this is really your relevance, at least in the beginning of it. And I think you have been with among with some other peers in this industry, quite the guiding voice on what the word means in the end. And we're going to talk about this afterwards, but I think for me it was very important to also see some faces attached to these new movements, especially PLG, growth, product-led sales, also in some regards. And yeah, for me it's amazing because I really enjoy talking about this stuff, and you're not the only one in this call that is, into this PLG thing. Just saying that,
For sure.
with a little bit
Yeah,
of
it
attitude.
definitely has changed though. Like since 6 years ago, when I started talking about it in OpenView too, where it was like there was like two companies talking about it, and I was like, oh, okay, who's gonna be next? And then it's finally like another SaaS company starts talking about it, and that's another one. And it's like now it's like how many others are there? So yeah, it's been a crazy ride over the last 6 years for sure.
It's quite funny because it's almost like the market, if there's a market for PLG, let's just say there's a market, right? I mean, we're also moving
Yeah.
in a market in terms of consulting or advising or whatever. It's almost
Yeah.
getting a little bit commoditized now
Mhm.
in that you have choice. But on the other hand, I still see that it's super difficult as a topic still. It's not like SaaS, like SaaS around the block, and then you say, like, yeah, SaaS is going to be our business model and everything is easier. No, no, no. PLG doesn't
Mhm.
make it easier, right? Um, do you also see this happening? That it's kind of, everybody's talking about it, but nobody knows how to actually do it.
Yeah, totally. Like I think it's still like early stages where it's like, okay, maybe a lot of SaaS companies, if you're in the SaaS space, you've at least heard about it once, or you've thought about it as for like, oh, maybe if we're not product led, like we should do this, and let's go for it. But yeah, there's a huge confusion about like how to actually do it, and it's not. I mean, initially it started off with like, hey, look at Slack, look at Airtable, look at Figma, like let's look at all these examples, and they're like, well, I'm not at that scale yet. I would like to do what they're doing, but like, where do I start? How do I do this? What are some of the core components? And so I think you're totally onto something. It is really about like, we're still uncovering what are the fundamentals of this whole thing. How do you do it and execute it extremely well? And really building a discipline around that. It's still like early kind of Wild West stage where people are like, this thing works for me. Let's teach it to everyone. This thing works for me. And it's like, yeah, it is commoditized, but I think there's going to be a bit more standardization around it. And that's actually, I look at that as a good thing where it's like, okay, let's tame this Wild West a bit and create a bit more of a methodology around it that's consistent for people.
Yeah, so this is where I start to struggle as well because I'm kind of trying to do the same. I wrote a PLG guide on this stuff. I know you also wrote some guides on this. We're trying to formalize everything, kind of standardizing,
Yeah.
as you said, the messaging, right? What I think is extremely difficult in that way is that, as you said, there's different stages of companies when they, make a decision. Okay, I want to go for PLG, whatever it is. And if the more established that you are, or the bigger that you are, the more difficult this becomes. And then if you're only
Mm-hmm.
sales led, it starts to become really, really difficult.
Yeah.
Um, but the message is just so much different. It's not just like, okay, you're doing something new. You have to transition from something that you already have existing to something completely new that requires also a lot of preconditions which are not so easy to implement by themselves either. And I think that's what makes everything so complicated. And yeah, go ahead. You wanted to say something?
Yeah, I think like at one end, it does seem complicated. Like, where do you start? But I actually think like this whole transition, like the fundamentals of business haven't changed with this introduction of product led growth. It's just how we sell that has really kind of changed and how we embody that. So I don't know about you, but like I define the fundamentals of business as like one is acquisition. Like you got to get people, you got to attract them to your website. They got to find out about you. It's like that has not changed. The monetization is kind of the next big pillar. It's like, okay, we got to figure out a way to turn people to customers. The engagement is like the third piece, which is like, okay, we got to figure out how to like get people to value, get them coming back. It's all that value exchange. And the last one is like expansion. And it's like, okay, how do we like grow that customer value? And so like, if we agree, like those are the four, it's like, what changed from this, like for that sales led company, let's say there right now it's acquire, monetize, and then engagement, like giving value is kind of like after the contract, right, for most of these sales like companies. And then it's about expansion. And so I think the overlooked thing is like it's just actually one shift, but it means and it impacts everything. Like it goes from
Yeah.
acquire to like, okay, it's engage, I got to give them value, and then it's monetize. And that one kind of big shift, it not only changes how you acquire companies, like, okay, it's now a free offer. We got to give them free stuff in order to do stuff, but you can't just slap on a free trial and make this work if you forget that engage part where it's like, actually, we need to give people value first. And if I've seen this, and I've also been a part of a company that didn't do this because we didn't know, and we just had a free trial and it just didn't work. And it's like, well, why? And it's because we were just going from acquire to like monetize anyone who signed up for that free trial. And I was like, that's a shitty experience. Nobody likes that.
Yeah, fair enough, fair enough. But I feel like sometimes when people like you and me are talking, we're like, like we're in this headspace. We talk about acquisition, retention, monetization. All of this is very nice. But
Yeah.
then when you are actually in the consulting calls with these companies, the problems start to like, well, as you said, like they're starting to implement something that they unironically read on LinkedIn. Then they maybe read a book or whatever. Not yours, of course, because what if yours, then they would be doing it right. But no, but they read something and then they try to implement free trials or whatever. And then you start, okay, so how did that go? Well, not very good. So what were the results? Well, we did not get enough leads, or like this and that happened, whatever. And
Mhm.
but as you dig deeper, tracking is missing. There's not a fundamental understanding of like what value creation is for the user instead of the
Yeah.
value capture for the business and so forth. So as you're starting to dig deeper, shockingly, you start to come to the realization that the top 5 tips on how to do PLG on LinkedIn was not enough.
Yeah.
And this is why I'm not afraid of ever running out of a job in this space, right? Because I think in the end, you said, okay, the business principles did not change. That's correct. But like your challenges going from a sales led business to this is usually that you lack all the conditions that you also need a healthy experimentation system.
Mhm.
Maybe maybe you don't even have enough customers and so forth. And this is where I think that, and maybe this is my first question to you, like in regards to the terminology itself. What people understand under the word product led growth is wildly different depending on the country, the time zone,
Yeah.
and wherever you go. I feel like in Europe, we're still sleeping a little bit. No, not a little bit, quite a bit in this regard. It's also one of the reasons why
Siesta
we
time.
probably, yeah, it's like, yeah, this is Spanish people. Yeah, I'm
Yeah.
sorry, my Spanish listeners.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know. It feels like there's a fundamental different understanding of what user value is and how you manifest it and how you actually surface it. As self understanding as it is for my American colleagues to track retention, you
Mhm.
actually have to really visualize this for European customers more often than not. I feel like we're still further away. I don't know whether you have an input on this, but like terminology and clarifying what it
Yeah.
is a big part of my job as well.
Oh, and it's one of the most important ones because it's like in order to actually help any of these companies really become product led or and implement PLG, however you kind of like surface it, it's really just like how do you get everyone on the same page? And so that's what we've noticed. Like we've been training hundreds of companies like how to actually implement this, how to design your self-serve model and everything else. But it all comes down to like the very first step is like, okay, let's get on a common understanding of what this means. Why are we doing this? And it's like the really simple stuff. But I think there is a lot of confusion out there of like, oh, it's like product-led growth means like it has to grow through your product, right? Product-led growth because it has the word product in it. It's a product initiative, right? And there's a lot of like slippery slopes and traps. Like,
Yeah.
no, yeah, it could, but not always, not for your product. And so it's really important to define what it just means for your specific business.
Yeah.
That's what I find is probably most important than like, okay, there's like many definitions, but what does it mean for us and our team? And how are we going to implement this?
Yeah, I'm always trying to think of whether there's a better term for it because I really think that the name product led growth does a disservice because it usually means that sales and marketing are not involved,
Yeah,
but they actually are.
which
So,
they shouldn't. No kidding.
you know, yeah, fuck marketing. We don't need them.
Yeah.
Um, I just lost 10% of my followers.
Yeah.
So no, but like, I'm trying to think of a better term. I never came up with one. Technically, it should be growth led growth, but that sounds stupid.
Yeah. Needs a rebrand.
I, yeah, it's not a good idea. Well, you know, like the growth term itself as well is very misunderstood. We're joking about as well on LinkedIn all the time, like how growth is misunderstood and everybody thinks it's just about acquisition, which then in turn is like, okay, it's just marketing, right?
Yeah.
Um, and yeah, I never came to a conclusion of this or like what would be a good solution. I really don't know. But yeah, are there any other terms where you feel like there is a mismatch with the people that you're dealing with in terms of it's within product led growth? You know, like if
Right.
I don't know if people have heard of product led sales, that's already an event in itself. But is there other terminology that you usually talk about and really have to make sure okay people are really getting it before you can move on?
Yeah, I mean, like, there's yeah, product-led sales is one of those like new ones where like, okay, what is this? Is this a completely new thing, or is it like a bolt-on? Is it like an extension of this? And what I kind of found is helpful for a lot of companies is like think of like product-led growth as like more of a spectrum than like a black and white sales-led product-led company. And then I kind of envisioned like product-led sales or sales assisted, however you want to describe it, as like it sits kind of in the middle, right? Completely one end product led is like that's your absolutely like a lot of people will see it as like self-serve 100%, and then like you kind of move in the middle, you're like more product led sales. You have maybe it's because you have so many like thousands of signups, you're like I just don't know which ones are which and which ones we should prioritize and kind of upsell. And then on the far end it's like okay, this is just enterprise. And I think like a lot of companies get in the trap of like it just has to be like this. And it's like, no, you want to build a model that complements how ultimately how you're going to win as a business. And so, yeah, I think like the labels can change, but like, yeah, that's kind of the way I'm thinking about it is more of a spectrum these days than black and white.
I might steal this. I really like the spectrum analogy. It's like, you know, it's on a I really like this because you can move a little bit also in, as you said, you know, like little steps as well. But
Yeah.
so here's excuse me, like here's a more practical problem that I've encountered in like let's say Series A, like a hypothetical customer that definitely does not exist. So Series A
But is a
company.
client of yours. They're not listening.
Maybe. So hypothetical situation. Series A, and they have ACVs of, I don't know, 150,000, 100,000.
Yep.
And I'm looking at this and I'm saying, like, okay, you have not found your ICPs yet. We're still trying to find out this entire positioning statement and so forth. And I have a hot take that I say PLG can actually, even though it is a distribution thing, it still can help you to find your ICPs. I'm pretty convinced about this because as you the ideal customer for PLG is usually situated in higher amounts, which means more data, lower LTV, so less risk. You know, like you don't have to always do what they say compared to an enterprise account that gives you 500,000 in the bank, and then you need to do what they say. Um,
Mhm.
so I don't know, because I'm always droning on about how it is a distribution model. And now I'm coming and saying, well, like it also helps you to find your ICPs. I don't know. I think this is an idea that I'm floating. So I'm asking myself whether I should advise a hypothetical customer that I do not have right now, in the sense to say, hey, why don't you reduce your targets on who you actually go for? So you might actually find your ICP faster. Because their solution is like, okay, we're starting to run out of runway. So we're going to go
So
for higher accounts, which does not make sense to me because these are not in the same markets. I don't
yeah,
know.
it's two different like ICPs, because like if you're gonna go like up that market, you're gonna be talking to buyers. That's totally different than users. Like product led is user first, sales led is buyer first. Two different people, two different ICP. So it's like if you're early stage and you're trying to like straddle both, it's like shoot them. I'm kidding, but it's like it's not going to work either way. If you're spread thin, and like there is obviously like for every time I say that, there's definitely one that like made it through and stuff like that, but it's a lot less likely that that's going to happen. And so I would just really focus on like what is the kind of business that you want. But like how would you think about that as far as like advising them to like whether you should think of it as this more as a distribution model, or is this, which way should you kind of approach it? Because I totally get the other side of the argument too, which is like we're just trying to sell something and make sure we're providing value. Going up market will at least give us more time to do that so that we can eventually serve those users. So there's two sides to any story.
Yeah. I think I struggle a little bit also with the control that you have as a consultant. I don't know how it is for you. Like, do you actively consult companies and then like these kind of setups?
Right now, I just do coaching. So I'm more kind of like a Socratic, whatever coach, where I don't actually kind of advise them, like, here's what you should do. I just kind of get them asking
Yeah.
the right questions so that they're like, okay, I need to do this.
Oh, okay.
Um,
So
yeah.
your typical coachee would be a head of product or something, for instance.
So yeah, a lot of times it's either the CEO or
Hmm.
like the CPO who's leading
Perfect.
like this big initiative.
Perfect for my question because so
Cool.
if you are like a one of these silent advisors, which a coach is in a sense, like I'm not telling you what to do, but like here's a suggestive question on what
Avoid
makes sense.
that. Yeah.
No, but like honestly, like also if I do coaching, I feel like it makes sense if you have the same domain expertise because you understand their problems intimately, and sometimes the lines get a little bit blurry between mentoring and coaching. I don't know,
Totally.
but um so here's so the question is if you're more like you're like one of these silent advisors, you're more a little bit on the sidelines, and someone is really asking you, Wes, I don't know how to bring this into the company because there's just not that much alignment for it. And I feel like if you're a mentor or a coach and you have this one person that you're advising from the C level, and there you have the
Mhm.
entire sales organization over there, which
Yeah.
you never really talk to directly, and you will never because you're the coach of this particular person. Um, I feel like your influence is very, very limited
Oh, totally.
because why would sales listen to what the coach of my CEO says? Kind of, yeah. Why would they even listen to it? Because it's feel like also with PLG, it's very important that you demonstrate the value, which is maybe a little bit easier on the marketing side.
Yeah.
But for sales, it means a different incentivization model. It means a completely different way on how to handle leads. They're very scared if you come into and say, guys, you're going to get less leads.
Yeah.
You need to look into data. Every salesperson that I've ever said that is getting their face breaks out in hives and they're scared, understandably, right? I don't
Mhm.
know. It feels
No,
difficult.
it's so typical. And I know back in the day when I was doing more consulting, that was the biggest problem. I was like, okay, I'm talking to like this one person, and then getting buy-in from the rest of the people was like it was a uphill battle, because it was just like, oh man, like nobody is like they're not moving that direction, even though it's probably the best one for them. I've seen this like a bunch of times. This would be big for them, but that's actually one of the reasons why we kind of stopped doing that. We said, actually, you know what? Like consulting is so kind of effective. Let's do more team enablement kind of training where it's like, actually, the stuff we'll cover in our program, so simple. it's like the simple questions like,
Huh.
who's our ideal user? What is our model for our business? What will serve us best? How are we going to help our users win? Like the basic stuff. And what we found is
Hmm.
like when everyone's a part of that discussion, including like that head of sales, head of marketing, you have those people who are typically going to resist it, but they're now a part of it. So they're like asking questions. They're like, are we sure about that? And should we like craft it this way? And they get their input in throughout the whole cycle of the
Yeah.
process. And then by the end, they're kind of like, hey, like let's go in, and you get everyone's buy-in through the process of that. And so that's what we found is a shortcut to some of that team alignment, because it is hard. Like that's one of the biggest blockers if your VP of
Hmm.
sales is like, no, forget it. Like this is cannibalizing our demo requests.
Yeah.
And it
So
will.
are you even mentioning the word product-led growth in in this regard then? Or is it
Totally.
like
I mean, the program's product that accelerator. So it's pretty specific. Like this is
uh,
what your goal is by the end of this. But you might also come out of it and be like, no, we're actually not going to do this for all these reasons.
yeah,
That's fine too.
that's pretty clever. Maybe I should join one of your programs just like undercover and then write
Undercover
about it.
cop. Yeah.
It's like I cannot be that undercover. Come on.
Yeah.
That's interesting. That's really cool. Okay, so I take away the scale thing. I really like this analogy. I think this is really good. Um, and then so you are doing this usually now over. So you said most of your income. I mean, not you personally. I don't know how much is you and how much is the company now at this point. Can you maybe
For
expand a
sure.
little bit how like product led that your brand has now evolved in the years, because it's more than just you now, right?
Yeah, no, for sure. We have a team. So at the early days, yeah, it was like predominantly consulting. Then we did in-person workshops. And then what we realized, COVID, nobody wants in person. And I don't blame them. So
Yeah.
basically our business like hardcore pivoted COVID. And it was online workshops
Yeah.
initially. And then we developed the Product Led Accelerator program, which is like a 4-week program that goes through the workshop format. And what we actually found out is like it's actually better than the in-person workshops, because
Yeah.
you are able to like get everyone just like a couple hours, 3 hours a week, and they're able to actually work on stuff and show up prepared for the next week. So yeah, we kind of found gold with this model.
Yeah. That's fascinating. So, did you have to change anything about the pricing structure on this stuff? Like, did you also like adjust this in any way, or like what did change on the program itself
Totally.
to what you did before COVID?
Yeah. So before, like, it was pretty expensive for like in-person card. It was like 30, 50K for a workshop.
Yeah,
And that was like a few days, and it's super intense, where people would go through it. And by the end, they would like be on the same page about like, what is PLG and simple things. But what we focused a lot more on is like, what is the basic question? So there's like 3 main questions that we get everyone on the same page now, which is each week has one of these questions. So the first one's like, who's your ideal user? Which is like sounds like an easy question, but it's really loaded. And going through it is hard, but getting everyone on the same page is really important. And the second one's like, what is user success? So, okay,
yeah,
for that specific user, what does that look like? Can we describe it all together as a team? And that's really important, because like I think a lot of companies going into, I'm sure you notice this too in PLG, where it's like, okay, we want to start this off right. Let's get the right product analytics. Let's get the right tooling in place right away.
yeah,
And I'm like, wait. Like, what's
yeah,
success for the user? Like, are we going to even track the right thing? Let's just take a step back and make sure we're clear on this, because a lot of times it's like you could use very simple tools to start
yeah.
to just see what this looks like. And then the last or third question is really just like, how do we help the user achieve that user success
Mm-hmm.
very quickly? Because back to that like fundamental shift we talked about at the beginning, it's like if you're truly going to put engage first, that means value first. So like, how can you create that value first experience where people are able to experience some sort of value before they actually pay? And so making that super fast is super important.
Yeah. I think there's two messages in there that I find quite interesting, because one of them is usually so like if somebody asks me what is product like growth because they hear about it and they're unsure, you know, like, and everybody
Yeah,
pretends that they know everything, of course, you know, they're just like,
of
well,
course.
for me,
Expert on LinkedIn.
yeah, but like
Yeah.
it is kind of a human thing, right? Like I I always explain every terminology in my presentations or whenever I go into workshops or I present something somewhere. I really try to define terminology on a very basic thing. Everybody
Yeah.
pretends that they know what an ICP is. Everybody does. And then I'd make an exercise sometimes that is quite funny that you can also take up for free. You try to get a definition of what a chair is. And then everybody's like, what do you mean? Well, okay, everybody write down what a chair is, okay? Like define a chair. Like an alien lands on the planet Earth and you're defining what a chair is. And then you
Yep.
have these funny, like, okay, is it 3 legs? Is it 4 legs? Can you sit on it? Can you not sit on it? Can it be decor? Can it be? And this is the thing sometimes when you talk about ICPs and you start to define, okay, your ideal user,
Yeah.
whatever that means. Um, First, they listen. They're really interested. And I wonder whether you also have this reaction. And then they try to apply to their own business. And then they're thinking, like, so what do we do with the other ones? Like,
Yeah.
okay, so we have a very specific definition, and we say our ideal user is staying with us for 2 years. So what do we do with the ones that don't, right? Because we have ACVs that are just like,
Yeah.
they're not behaving in this way. And I love these discussions. I do. But at some point, they realize, okay, that means you're cutting off the life support of the other ones, right? Like we're really focusing on these guys. And
Yeah.
that was the first learning for me. Like you have to be super careful about this discussion. And the other one is, as you said, usually they come with these ideas of like, oh, like we looked at these 10 tools and we're going to do this and that. Chill out. Sometimes we can do it with a Google
Yeah.
Sheet. It's that simple. And then you can move on to amplitude for a long time before everything breaks. Yeah, but what if we have to change it in a year? Yeah, then you change it in a year. That's totally okay. Um, yeah, but it's funny. So like, what would you say is the very first step of action that a company usually can take? So let's say they go with your product
Yeah.
led accelerator. Like, what is the very first step that usually a company takes? Is it about identifying the ideal user then afterwards?
Yeah, there's a couple steps that even I'm just kind of discovering too, where I'm like, oh, okay, like if they did this one step before the other ones, even our program, this would be way better.
Yeah.
And what I'm noticing is like the very first one is just building a product led strategy. Like, what does that look like for your specific business?
Hmm.
And getting around the same page on the leadership team as far as like, let's think of this as more of a company strategy and let's kind of shy away from like, no, this is just a product initiative. Because when you like really uncover it, there's like, how does a product led business win? It's a lot of it is kind of the same. If you look at it, it's like you provide incredible free value, you make it the simplest, easiest to accomplish whatever that task is, whatever that value is, and then you give them everything they need to accomplish that user success. So it's like there's really these three core things, and that's how you win as a business. And you can do that. It ties back to your mission, which if you see a lot of product led companies, they actually have very similar missions. It's like form builders for everyone, like making this accessible for everyone. Like it's the same stuff regurgitated, and all of it is combined because I truly believe I'm like actually product led, and not our company, but like product led in general. I think the overarching vision here that I'm really excited about, I was writing it
Hmm.
down even before this call, is like empowering anybody to create anything. I think like all of this stuff connects back to that. And it's
Yeah.
like what we're really creating, what we're really kind of moving towards is a world where it's like you don't need to know everything to do anything. It's like, okay, if you want to create your dream business, okay, go to Shopify, create an e-commerce. Easy. We're just like creating tools so that anybody can do anything. So that's really what I'm excited about. And I think it's like if you miss that part of like this is the company strategy, this is where we over connect to that part. That's really exciting. And then
Yeah.
the kind of next big part is like, okay, you need a team to do this. Like, what's your PLG task force? Like, get that clear. You got to have ownership. And this is just standard business 101. It's like, oh, you want to make a difference in your business, have someone accountable, put metrics around it, track it, give them the right functionalities in the business, give them resources to actually do this stuff, and just go in that direction.
Yeah. If I could subscribe like a SaaS service to this, I would. Right
Yeah.
now, just pay the account right away. I think what you said is really beautiful, and it goes. I would even go further because if I'm getting also quite excited about this topic. So the first thing that you said is that it should not be a product initiative. But this is usually how PLG starts out. Let's find a
Yeah.
way to implement a trial, maybe, I don't know, freemium model, something like that. We need Wes to explain us this, right? So like this is the initial reaction. But if you frame it as a company strategy, what you could really, like, if you go one step higher to what you just said, it really is about ultimate elimination, or like the goal is, the BHAG is to have no friction in life, to have access to
Yeah.
anything. I don't want to have friction in adoption. I don't need a salesperson to tell me that I can buy this. I want to have no friction in retention. I want an easy to use product. I
Yeah.
don't want it to be complicated, something that fits with my knowledge that I have. And I don't want it to cost too much, right, for the value that I deliver, which is usually also a hallmark of PLG:
Friction.
low,
Yeah.
low CAC, low friction on anything. And you know what I love the most about it? Because I was burned for 10 years or more in sales organizations. So hard as a product manager, but also for the users that we were developing stuff. I strongly believe that one of the most amazing factors on product led growth and cross functional teams, because they're usually very connected together, and to be so close with the customer, is that
Yeah.
if you serve the customer well and you do it honest, this is how you create the long term value. And that means, because of this, like, it sounds a little bit dystopian sometimes.
Oh yeah,
It's
totally.
like, you know what I mean, right? It's like, if we do well for the customer, we get money. But it also means, in turn, there is no reason on this earth not to be excellent to your customers, and no reason to be not excellent to your own employees, because
Mhm.
we empower our employees, we empower the teams. I hope that's what you meant also with the task force, right? Because the teams
Totally.
become, we're an
Yeah.
expert in our customers. We dig into data, we understand what they do, so we need to do our own decisions. So we have to also treat our employees in almost a PLG way. I honestly
Mhm.
think that this is the next step that's going to happen. And because you have the economic leverage with it, is what makes it so powerful. There's no reason to be an asshole. The slavery style does not work anymore from 10 to 15 years ago. And none of this was conscious, back then. But like, it was just, that's just the way it was. It's just like, okay, someone has an idea somewhere in management. Here are 10 teams that are trying to execute on it. I don't
Yeah.
know.
I agree with that. The only thing I would disagree when it comes to implementing PLG, especially if you're in a sales like company, is you gotta have that top down and alignment
Oh, no, 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 for
initially,
sure.
like
Yeah.
100%. I have not seen it being like, oh, this is like the product manager's little initiative, and then it's like, boom, this 700 person company like successfully made the transition. It's like there's gonna be blood, and it's like you got to be okay with the leadership team bleeding a bit. And sweating and being like, is this gonna work? And then when they kind of come out, they see the light at the end of the tunnel, like, okay, good, that was a good idea. But
Not what I meant. Not what I meant.
no,
But I
no, I don't think
appreciate the
so.
metaphor. I really, really appreciate. No, no. Whenever there's blood in the metaphor, when it comes to product, I love it. No, no. For integration, for sure. But I'm talking
Yeah,
about
yeah,
the ultimate finalized organization
yes,
should be non-directive and supportive. But
totally.
I love the analogy. So let's just say I said it this way. Yeah, it's totally.
We'll go with that. No, I like it.
All right. So like, um so what would be the perfect, the absolute perfect company that you see booked the product led accelerator? Who profits the most from this, if this is still your core product,
Yeah,
right? Who would be the perfect account for this, other than
yeah.
being
So
Canadian?
I mean, yeah, that's the starter. Could be anyone. I've had people honestly from all over the world join, so it doesn't matter for that part. But yeah, for a perfect company, that's usually someone who's working at a B2B SaaS company for the most part, and they're creating some great software. They have a great product team. They really care about their product. They really care about their users. But they're at the early stages of making this transition. So maybe they've launched a free trial, they've tried it out, but they feel like, you know what, something's missing. And they do have a leadership team, but that leadership team isn't all aligned around how do we actually do this. They're starting to realize that actually this
Mhm.
is more than a product thing, it's a complete company thing. And they really want to kind of move in one direction, have a common language around this. And so that's really when for a lot of companies, that's kind of, if they're around like that 5 to maybe like 15 million range, that's where we can really provide like a humongous amount of impact, get everyone on the same page. If it's bigger than that, we could still help them. It's just, it is a lot harder. As you mentioned earlier, the bigger you are making this
Yeah.
transition, it is a lot harder. It takes longer, even how you roll it out at a company above 10 million in recurring revenue. A lot of times that looks like spinning out a whole nother product to
Yeah.
test it out, because you don't want to mess around with the core product, because like, this thing's working finally. It took us so long enough, and then yeah, you don't want to kind of mess it around just for the V1 version of, here's our product led trial.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting because I think there's also a range of revenue where you should not game with your distribution model. You're now in
Yeah.
full force to figure out whatever you're doing, whether it's marketing led, sales led, product led, whatever. You just don't mess with it. I feel like the range is really interesting. So you said up until 15, something like this, right? Is kind
Yep.
of
You
okay.
got it.
Then it starts to be the danger zone, and then don't come back until you hit like 60, 70 or something like this. I don't know. That's my kind of range that I have in my head. Um,
No, we do have companies that are like well past that. We even had like billion-dollar companies like go in and like take their program, but the way they roll it out is always different. It's like, we can provide the leadership team as well as their PLG task force. Like, that's usually the same team in a lot of companies around that range. Whereas like at that stage, they've actually had to spin out like a new business unit. And working with
mm,
business units is like, it's effective. It's just, it's all dependent on what is a relationship with that C-level executive that you're working with, who's sponsoring this. And like, if they have the buy-in of everyone else, great. But like, a lot of times that's not always the case. And so
yeah,
eventually it will be like, everyone in that company is going to have to operate with that product-led mindset. But
yeah.
it's obviously harder.
Maybe that's the connection though. Like if you're below a specific size, let's say like I don't know, you're in the 30, 40 million range, you just don't have the pull yet to have a specific business unit or a separate one. Even
Yeah.
if you have to see level backing, probably I mean I don't know, like 30, 35, you probably have about 10 product teams if you're really cross-functional, that kind of. So it starts to get really difficult. But above that size, you might have the special department. I don't know how big HubSpot was when they did their entire stint with disrupting the entire market. Um, but I know that's also how they did it. They had this. I think the message was, I don't know with whom it was. I never remember who actually implemented it, but I know that the CEO said like, you go somewhere in the basement, you do not come back, and you're not committing anything to our code base. You just do this entire thing until you're successful. So yeah, no, that's interesting. I think I agree with this in that sense. So that there is a range somewhere. Did I just agree with myself? I'm not sure because I think I made a point. There is a certain
No,
range
no.
where it's dangerous.
Yeah,
Yeah,
no, totally. It's when I was at Vidyard too, that's exactly how we did it. It's very similar to HubSpot, where it's like, we were over 10 mil in
yeah,
recurring revenue. We had the sales led model, it was working. Um, I think a lot of it too also has to do with what kind of investors you have, if you are venture backed, because like, in that case, the the whole kind of premise of that funding was like, we're going to hire a great sales team grow
yeah,
on this
exactly.
go-to-market strategy. And then they see them like funneling money over to like the product-led initiative. I was like, no. So that's a factor, which now like VCs are definitely like, they actually prioritize this model, because they know, like, especially going into recession, it's like, this is way more efficient.
Yeah,
You can go
yeah.
faster and all these things. So that has changed for sure.
This is very interesting because that's usually forgotten quite a lot. Like when we talk about Series A, Series B, that means okay, they had a couple of funding rounds. That means they also have a couple of investors, and especially with more inexperienced startups, I also see that people are just being taken for the ticket size. So they can be
Yeah.
taken up, and the investors have preferences. For sure,
Mhm.
especially if they have a say on the table, they will favor a specific approach, whether that's good or not, and
Yeah.
whether that is influence on your business is how you structured in the end, like the funding round. And yeah, this is all fun topics that you have to deal with that the regular
Yes.
employee just does not have any empathy for.
Nope.
But yeah, it can mess up your day, I guess. Would you agree to the statement that I don't know? Do you do any product-led sales? Do you have any product-led sales topics also in this entire thing that you have on the accelerator? Is that also a topic sometimes?
Honestly, we noticed, like, at least in the market as well, that most companies aren't actually even at that stage. Like, I
Mm-hmm.
feel like maybe feel free to disagree here, but like, I feel like product
Yeah.
led sales is probably still 3 years early.
Mm-hmm.
And it's the reason I say that is because I'm like, actually, the majority of the companies that we deal with, and we're like top of funnel when it comes to PLG. And if you write about what is PLG, like we're the one of the first people you're going to bump into. And so we're noticing, and we like do a ton of segmentation. It's like people are still at the like first stage. Just like
Yeah.
now about 64% of people like that come to our website are like, I know what PLG is, which is amazing. It's like, thank you, market, for updating people on this. But then the second part is like, okay, you don't have a self-serve. Like there's still about 60% of people that just like they're bought into PLG, but they don't actually have the self-serve kind of component or model. So it's like
Yeah.
the product-led sales thing is like they got to get this part right first, which is like get your users the
Yeah.
value. And I think like what might actually happen, which is kind of to a disadvantage of PLG kind of blossoming, is like, okay, let's say we load up a lot of these like soon to be product led companies with a lot of product led sales tech. And what's going to happen is it's going to be the move from acquire to monetize. And
Yeah.
we're just going to see a lot of like, oh
Yeah.
God, like I signed up
No
for that
retention.
trial, or
Yeah.
I signed up for that freemium model, and like, damn, I got like spammed. And it's like, then these companies are going to go to the
Yeah.
product led sales tool and be like, this shit isn't working. It's like, well, actually, the problem was you didn't engage your users. You actually didn't create an experience that was super successful for them. So I feel like the market is early and they
Yeah.
need to focus on that first piece and that first fundamental area before they get fancy with the monetization part. And so like, yeah, that's my rant.
So I think I don't have any statistical evidence for what I'm about to say, but I think I agree with this. Interestingly, the problem that I see is that a lot of sales led gigs try to look into product led sales because in their mind, it's kind of like, okay, so how do we get from sales led to product led sales?
Yeah.
Whereas the problem is that you cannot do this because product led growth is becoming actually a table stake before that. And
Mm-hmm.
there's some bad news in there because it means you need to build a lot of stuff around this as well. So that kind of funnel, if it's it is kind of a funnel because it dies there, right? But like that
Yeah.
kind of does not work at all. Also, like I also see this in consulting. There's just no room for it. It does not work.
Yeah.
Um,
I think one thing that might have to like come even before for like product led sales to really take off and have that adoption. I fully believe like it will have that one day, but with the sales led motion, there was a new role. Like there's always a new role where like it complements it. In the sales led motion, the big thing was the SBR, like sales development representatives. They were
yeah,
like critical. You would have them kind of like qualify people, and that was the whole kind of thing with the model why it was successful, because like they didn't have to have expensive account executives. They pay them to do all the qualification. They just like source sift out a lot of the stuff. So like what I'm noticing right now in a lot of the product companies that are making this transition is they realize there's actually a need for a new role. And what's happening is the name of that role is all over the place. Like some people call it like product led sales. Is like, okay, great. That's maybe what they do. Then I've also seen like technical sales. I've
mm-hmm.
seen people call them onboarding coaches. I've seen Zendesk call them customer advocates. And what they do is all the same. They
Yeah,
look at the people who are using the product, and their whole goal is they first, their number one priority is get you to value. Two, once they do, it's about that monetization discussion and really just helping you get buy-in if you work at a bigger company or anything like that. So that role, I think, is like a critical first step in this direction. And I think it's still too early to be like, oh, it's like onboarding coaches. Like that sounds kind of foo-foo, but let's give it an actual name. And I think that discipline needs to be created, which kind of goes back to our initial
yeah,
talk about like it's still the Wild West. There's going to be new disciplines with any new go-to-market strategy. There's new job opportunities, which is the best part because these companies are growing faster. And there needs to be
yeah,
a bit of standardization around, okay, this new role. And I think that product-led sales category is going to need to seed that first. Be like, okay, let's get some consistency. Let's get some training. Let's build more academy stuff around like how do we help more people win at this one role, because those are the people they're going to be selling to,
Yeah.
or at least their
Yeah.
manager, maybe.
Yeah, no, for sure, for sure. And I was thinking of, while you were mentioning all these roles or the names that they gave them, now it also starts to get mixed up with customer success, like classical customer
Oh
success
yeah,
functions,
but it's
and
like user
that,
success, which is like there's
yeah,
like customer
exactly,
onboarding and then there's
yeah,
user
because
onboarding. Yeah,
yeah, because if a classical salesperson hears customer success, they think, oh, okay, I'm going to be a key account manager. No, you're not. You're
yeah,
absolutely, it's not your role. Chill out, right? And what I'm thinking about myself, like what I'm thinking as well, is that, I mean, it's kind of harsh for salespeople in that sense. I mean, not kind of harsh, because you will always have mixed models, right? Like you will have
yeah,
a spread between your customer base. Okay, these guys are low touch, these are no touch and high touch. I'm What I find really interesting is that, does this mean in the future that salespeople might end up in teams, whereas before they were solo? Do you know what I mean? Like, like they have to work in a cross-functional team maybe, whereas before they never had to. And this transition will be quite harsh for some of them, so they will not even go for these kind of roles. So product-led sales, in my opinion, will be in a really strong team, in a cross-functional team, really eventually, maybe even with a marketeer, and then they're like, what?
yeah,
I have to work with marketing?
totally.
A function they learned to hate for 10 years. So, yeah, you know how it is. Like, why are you giving us like these shitty MQLs?
Totally. Yeah, there
Exactly.
has to be some sort of like drama for business to be happy, right?
Oh
What's
God,
that next
sales.
conversation? Don't give me these PQLs. These aren't good. Your
Yeah,
scoring's off. It'll be the same thing. It's just different.
yeah, yeah. I guess. Yeah, but it's going to be so wild. I think sales is going to be a bloodbath, as you called it. I think you didn't say it in the context of sales, but like it's going to be. I think it's going to be a bloodbath. But for
Yeah.
product, I think it's also that. Um, if you talk about just pure growth roles, not product growth, just growth. Like, let's say you want to bring a head of growth. Where does this role go? I've had so many discussions with so many people,
Yeah.
marketing, product, sales, over there. We don't really know. It doesn't, but I think most of it will go to product, or growth will inherit most of what product is. I don't know.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, it's going to be so much chaos and fun.
Yeah, that role has a short tenure anyways. So I think that's part of the reason. It's like, where does this exist? Nobody knows. It's different.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
true. Yeah. I guess. But I think we will see a lot more CGOs. I This is one of my predictions. We will see CGOs, Chief Growth Officers. This will happen. It's such a cool title. Come on. CGO, no?
I
Is
mean,
it not cool?
yeah, I
You're
feel like it's
skeptical.
cool, but like, wouldn't that? I guess like they would fire their marketing person, or like CMO, and be like, no, we just have a CGO, because like I haven't seen a CGO and a CMO.
Yes, that's true. That is very true. So you would offer the title to the CMO, and if the CMO is one of these old traditionalists, then yes.
Fire
Bye.
'em.
Bloodbath.
Just bloodbath, yeah.
Oh my God, there's going to be so much drama. I will make sure that I have a lot of popcorn for the next 10 years. So that's going to
Yes.
be good. Okay, cool. Um, yeah, let's just go a little bit more into a question that always very generic. No, actually quite fun, because this is the first time that I'm actually asking it.
Yeah.
If total switch of gears now, Wes. Okay, I hope you're ready for it. If you would go missing and your friends would describe you to the police, how would they do it?
Interesting. Friends. Oh man. Tall guy. Short hair. I don't know, other than like the descriptive part of like I'm just
Yeah,
six
but like
five,
let's
I'm
say,
tall.
yeah, but let's say it's a room full of tall guys all looking like Wes. Like, how can we figure out through a discussion who it is?
Yeah, lanky.
Lanky.
Yeah, quiet for the most part.
You are?
Yeah, yeah.
Really?
I am totally introvert for sure. Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
That is amazing.
But I can
That's
put on
amazing.
this beautiful show for like an hour that I'm like, I'm tired.
So I actually learned something about myself in this regard. People
Yeah.
constantly think that I'm an extrovert. And I don't know whether this
Yeah.
happens to you now as well, right?
Oh, totally.
I love going on stage and I love burning through my hours, which is totally fine.
Yeah.
But then the afterwards flocking that happens, I'm just like, yeah,
Yeah.
can I go to the toilet and then just climb out of the window?
Yeah.
And
I'm
someone
done.
told me, yeah, someone told me that this is an ambivert. I don't know.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think, yeah,
Okay, we're
I don't know.
ambiverts now.
I don't know. You can look it up afterwards. It's fine. There's an ambivert accelerator somewhere where you can learn something about yourself. I don't know. I
Join
guess.
the program.
Okay, so if Wes Bush had a time machine and you could go back 10 years in time, is there a specific company that you would have loved to join?
Ooh, 10 years.
You can also take 9 years.
Yeah.
Whatever.
I like a specific company I like to join. I
Or be a
loved,
fly on the wall.
yeah. I actually really liked my time at Vidyard. It was cool. Like we grew like a weed. It was super cool to kind of make that transition from sales led to product led, at least in the
Hmm.
early days. Um, but that kind of like was pivotal to where I am today as far as like what I do, the problems I like solving. So I wouldn't honestly change it. Like I guess I'm one of those people where I look back at my past. I'm like, do I really want to change it? Like I feel like things worked out for the most part, and sure, like probably could have made some shortcuts here or there if I was smart enough at that time, but then I wouldn't remember the learnings, I guess, in some
Yeah.
ways.
So would you do something different with the knowledge from today? I mean, I hope you would, but like, no, I didn't learn anything in 10 years.
No, absolutely nothing. Yeah. Oh man, I think I just like would have delegated a lot more earlier.
Yeah.
I think that's the biggest thing is like when you build a business, you have high standards, you want to like just, own a lot, or at least that was me. And
Yeah.
then I just realized I can't do everything. I'm actually the biggest bottleneck of like what I am doing. And so, yeah, learning to hire, learning to fire, learning to delegate, get people who are A players like on your team and stuff like that. That would be probably one of those things I would just do way earlier because I guess, yeah, there's just like that control, like, oh, I got to do it myself. But it's like,
Yeah.
yeah. And then you find someone who's incompetent who does it and you delegate, like, look, I was right. And then it's like, well, you fucked up. Like you didn't hire the right person. You didn't vet them right. You didn't give them the right like project to kind of test this out, test the waters. So you kind of like can create your own self-fulfilling prophecy in a way where like, oh yeah,
Yeah.
it didn't work out. I guess it wasn't meant to be. But yeah, it can totally be changed. So that's the biggest thing I think I've learned in the past like 3-4 years that I would be like, okay, I'd start that way earlier.
Yeah. That's so true. It's so true. Like I found it about three companies, and one of them, one of them, I drove so hard into the wall because I was just not getting a co-founder. Because I was like, why would I give up 50% of my company
Yeah.
if I can just keep it all? So now I own all of nothing. Well, this is really good. It's a good, like,
Yeah.
if you want investment tips, just call me up on LinkedIn. That's good. Yeah. So that's really good. All right. So, final question for you, or second final one, and then you can do some advertising for your accelerator if we didn't do that enough yet. So, but like, is there a trend that you feel like is coming in the industry that either worries you or something that really excites you, something that you feel like in the next 5 years it's going to happen? Um, can be related to product led growth or something completely different, something that you're passionate about and feel like it's
Yeah.
happening.
Hmm. I think for yeah, this is a good one. There's tons of trends. I remember I was chatting with it was a new podcast as well. Miriam, who's the co-founder of Softer.io, and they're like this like Lego block tool for building anything on the web.
Yeah.
And it was kind of interesting. It was like her world is no code tools where you can do anything. I was like, my world is like PLG where you can like basically do a lot of this stuff, but with different tools, and it's not as like customizable in some ways. But what was the commonality trend, and like what's the
Mm.
macro trend between the two? Whether it's like low code, no code, PLG, what does it all have in common? And I think it's like it's really just one mega trend, and it's just people want to do more with spending less time. It's like people want faster time to value, and like every single
Yeah.
industry, that's
Yeah.
what it's going to look like. So I just see a lot more people moving towards that kind of, like, we call it the creator economy or whatever you want to call it. It's just that people are going to be able to do so many other cool things. We think about like how easy it is to like create an online business, how easy to become a freelancer nowadays. It's like everything's easy. And I think like when that's for the most part easy to get started, that's just going to open the door to like so many other like creative opportunities, more new ideas and stuff. So that's really what I'm excited is we're just creating the infrastructure for the internet still, so that you could really do anything on it.
Yeah. And one of the big discussions that I had with Scott Brinker was around AI and also like no code tools, because it sometimes goes a little bit into the same direction, like enabling
Yeah.
yourself also with stuff. And I think we came to the conclusion, and I also shared this, that it's probably more going into the direction of supporting rather than replacing people.
Yeah.
I will always need a designer in my life to do certain things for sure. But now I can also create some stuff, like a concept really fast, also with AI, and the quality is starting to be really good. And the same goes
Yeah.
for these creative or like what do they call it? Generative AIs and stuff. And yeah, we're back on the topic where we said like low friction. We enable people to do what they want to do. So I guess the limit is becoming the imagination. I don't know. That sounds pretty cool.
Yeah.
And now we just need to bring the
Sounds
word
new
bloodbath
age.
into it. Then it sounds even more amazing.
Yeah.
That's
Hey,
impossible.
I'll buy into that.
Yeah. All right, Wes. Thank you so much for joining me. I think this was an amazing conversation. So, how can people get in contact with you? Do you want them to contact you?
Absolutely
And
not. As we mentioned, I'm that introvert. I guess now I'm an ambivert. So no, people can actually contact me for sure. But the best way is probably LinkedIn.
Mhm.
Just feel free to connect on there. And then if you want to learn more about like product led stuff, we have a ton of free stuff. My book, Product Led Growth, still we gave it away in April, but a lot of people are like, "Oh, it's free." So yeah, creating
Oh,
awareness
it's
around
free.
that. Productledbook.com. Yeah, you can go get it for free. It's not even gated or anything like that. So yeah, feel free. If you're new to PLG, you want to learn more, dive deeper, I definitely start there.
That's pretty cool. Thank you so much. And I don't think you mentioned your domain. It's productled.com. You're sitting on this one. I cannot. I didn't manage to buy it off you yet. So
No,
hold on to it a little bit more. Thank you so much, Wes.
that's good.
And hopefully not for the last time.
For sure. Thanks for having me.